Say goodbye.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. That's terrible. Shit, I don't even remember like what I was gonna call these. You know, it's an overview video, but I don't have like a name for it.
What day do you release these on? Builder Mondays?
Mark 18 Monday.
It is definitely a Mark 18 inspired build.
This is Motivational Overview Monday. The video is called Mom. I hate this so much. Dude, it's my first day.
It's my first day too. All right, and I'm not going to compensate it.
All right, thanks for tuning in again to one of my overviews of one of my rifles. This one here is an MCX that I am sort of cloning into an LVAW. Now, I know I've said in the past that clones are lame. This is the one exception, always going to be an exception to the rule. The LVAW is actually one of my favorite clones. Surprisingly enough, this is actually not my favorite gun, even though it's my favorite clone. And, you know, what exactly is a clone, right? You know, you got a lot of people nowadays use terminology from military rifles to make their own version of it. And to a certain degree, I would say you can have a clone and make a Mark 18 with a lot of really similar components. But I see a lot of people on the internet put together a gun that none of the pieces are correct or anywhere close to the build, and they'll call it a Mark 18 or some kind of clone out there. I'm gonna be the first to admit that this isn't 100%.
This kind of behavior is never tolerated in Boracua. They put you in jail right away.
But the LVAW is one of the more difficult guns to clone because most of the components are extremely difficult to get a hold of, or you can't get a hold of the real thing. So let's get into the individual components of this gun. As usual, we'll go tip to butt so you can see the overview of the rifle. To start off with, I think one of the reasons why I like this gun a lot is because it has the integral suppressed look. Right here, I've got an Omega 300 suppressor. Now, this one is definitely not the clone correct version. SIG makes a suppressor for the LVAW specifically, and that particular suppressor, even though there is a civilian variation of it, it has a slightly different baffle stack size. So the actual LVAW one is a little bit longer. This one tends to be a little bit shorter, but it's the only 30 cal suppressor that I have currently. So I'm deciding to use it for this build as a temporary measure until I can get something a little bit closer. I believe the SIG suppressor is the SRD 762 Ti or something like that, or maybe it's not the Ti one, but anyway, there's some differences. Like for instance, on the SIG suppressor, there's some spiky things on the front end for pokey pokes and stabs. On the actual LVAW one, there's just these little cylinders that kind of constitute a spike, but it's not really a spike. But I think you can still kind of use it as a standoff device. So behind the suppressor, or over it, I have the LVAW style rail. So you may recognize this if you look at early generation MPXs. They have this kind of different sort of mounting system where you basically just bolt Picatinny rails to it. As you can see on this side, I do have a Picatinny rail bolted to this to add accessories. It is proprietary, so you do have to use components that will fit into this slot and into the screw holes. However, I have not done this myself, but I believe you can take M-LOK accessories, and if you just shave off the inserted portion on the backside, the holes line up, but you just have to replace the screws with the correct thread pattern. This particular rail is a replica rail that is made by a company called Altered Ego. These rails are made for actual guns, so they're not like a prop or an airsoft part, but it's actually made for you to put onto MCXs. And it is a clone rail to the LVAW. However, it is not the actual one because the correct LVAW is issued on its own MCX that isn't available to civilians for purchase. So the closest thing you can get to it is a Legacy Gen 1 MCX. So this rail is once again made by a company called Altered Ego. They're out of Europe. It took a long time for me to get this rail. I remember when I put in my pre-order, people were talking about how acquiring these rails was taking longer than it was to acquire a tax stamp. So that was kind of funny. And I believe I ended up waiting, I think, almost a year to get my rail. I'm not going to blame the guy. I think that, you know, processing this kind of stuff and the situation that he was in, pretty tough. What's kind of interesting is that I actually won a raffle for a giveaway of some parts and a rail from him, and I haven't heard from him since. So I hope you're still alive, because I love the components and the parts and stuff like that. But man, there's some stuff going down in Europe. I don't know what part of Europe. I hope you're okay, man. If you see this video, just reach out to me just to, you know, let me know if you're still alive. I love the rails. I think it's awesome. He did a really great job on these. These are very close to the look and aesthetic on the LVAW rifles. It even has the marking for right here, supersonic, and on the other side it says subsonic. This is basically to indicate on the adjustment lever for the gas system, whether you're shooting subsonic or supersonic ammunition, you can flip the lever and basically it'll indicate which side is up and down to the type of ammo that you're shooting. Outside of the rail here, I showed you earlier, I have this Picatinny rail is actually sold by a different company. The company's name is called Sheffield Tactical, and they're a really small custom shop that does basically LVAW and MCX components. So his rails are actually, his rail panels are actually compatible with the Altered Ego rail as well as his own rails. Altered Ego does make rail accessories as well. I just didn't happen to buy that rail section from him. But these guys are US local, so I purchased one from them just so that I can attach the Scout light. This here is a Scout Mini. This one's the Pro model, so it rotates into place. As for lights, for the cloning aspect of it, you can use a lot of different types of lights, and I believe most of the Surefire Scout lights in tan are acceptable. And so for the cloning purposes, there are some variations, I guess, known to be an acceptable quantity that you can use, whereas there are some things that will be a little bit more strict. I've got a PEC 15 on the top here. The nice thing about the Legacy MCX is that the rail is actually further out than the Virtus or the Spear LT. So you can actually mount the laser a lot further forward on these guns and still have it be essentially mounted to the receiver rather than mounted to the rail, which SIG has had some QC issues with their rail systems not holding zero. So if your upper receiver ends much closer to the rear, then if you mount your PEC out front or any kind of laser or sighting system, that can kind of throw off your zero. So it is really nice that on the Legacy guns, the rail system actually extends out this far so that I can put my PEC a little bit further forward. This gives me the ability to grip the gun a little bit further up. You can kind of see where the button is for the light, so I can activate the light here, and then I can spin my thumb over, and as you can see, I have a mod button light, right? As you can see, I have a mod button light button here for the laser. So this one is the 4.5 inch cable length, and it's for crane lasers. So anything that, like for example, the PEC 15 is compatible. Any of the lasers that use the crane plug style, it will be compatible. So I just mounted this back here because since the altered rail is very thick, it's a little bit more difficult for me to reach up and press the fire button. It's not that I can't do it, but it's nice to have an alternate option to basically be able to grip the rail a little bit more traditionally with that Magpul C-clamp. And I can activate the button here or here, and I can still actuate my flashlight button here as well. So moving to the rear from that, I have, I totally forgot to mention, but I've got them both here. So I mentioned before on some of my guns that I like to have extra QD sockets to move my sling around to different positions. Traditionally speaking, I think for a 2-point sling, I really like having the attachment at the front and the rear. So this, in my opinion, is the ideal positioning for a 2-point sling on a rifle. However, there are some instances where you might move the sling to a different position, maybe to free up your hand space here or whatnot. So the 2 sling attachments I have on the front section of the gun These are made by SIG. It's a Picatinny low profile attachment for a QD socket. Now, I will admit that having it offset on the front here isn't the most ideal positioning. I think I would like it to stick right out the side. However, this does keep the profile of the gun very low, so I do like that a lot, and I especially like using this QD socket right here. It's super solid and it's very low profile. This one is a perfect example to show that accessories can be mounted around the QD cup very easily. So I have a KAC micro front sight that I've actually mounted over the top of the socket right here. So the socket's actually flat enough that when I fold down the front sight, folds nicely over it and tucks over that. There's not a lot of QD sockets out there that will give you that capability. And so that allows me to push the sight a little bit further. Because of the limited rail space on this gun, I have to put the front sight to the rear. And I know that most of my builds that I've shown you so far have the front sight mounted way further back. In my opinion, having the extra iron sights on there is nice, even though I would say most of the time I'm not actually shooting with iron sights. So realistically speaking, they're really a emergency last ditch backup situation. I've got an Aimpoint T1 on here, and these are known to be bulletproof. Eventually, I will be swapping this out for a T2, but at the moment I'm rocking a T1, and I've got the KAC battery cap on here. The battery cap is an awesome addition to Aimpoint T1s and 2s, or any type of Aimpoint, well, any type of micro sight that has the 2032 battery style, because it allows you to house two 2032s and you'll put them back to back so that when one dies, then you'll just open the cap, flip the batteries around, and basically you have another 5 years of battery life ready to rock and roll, and then just change out the dead one whenever you remember. I would say sooner the better, because you don't want 10 years down the road to be at the range and both batteries are dead. Change your batteries right now. The Aimpoint is resting on a LaRue lower 1/3 height mount. Basically, this combination is a combination that has been seen on MCX LVAWs in the wild. So, this configuration right here, I would say minus some of the accessories. They're probably not using the mod button and some of the other accessories. However, this combination of PEC, Scout Light, and the Aimpoint is a pretty classic combination that you've seen with the LVAWs as far as classic goes. This is a relatively new gun, so there's not that many sightings out there. But this LaRue mount is one of the options. There is another combination that is a much Guccier option if you can afford it. It's going to be the Wilcox tannadized riser with the direct co-witness, and the type of mount is, instead of being a solid block, it actually is scalloped inward, and then same type of Aimpoint, either a T1 or T2 mounted to that on top of the riser. That also gives you the option to put a magnifier in the rear. I don't see that as often. Usually I just see the Wilcox riser with the Aimpoint and the LaRue mount, but for now, this is the setup that I'm rocking. This one is a KAC rear flip up backup iron sight, and this one's the 300 meter one. Right behind it, I've got a little bit of an upgrade from the standard charging handle. This one is the Radian Raptor LT for the MCX. This is not a standard AR-15 charging handle. You do have to use the MCX specific one. It is a little bit annoying, but it is cool that Radian makes a charging handle for the MCX, so you can kind of upgrade and have slightly larger ears. I think the Ambi one that it comes with, just the latches are a little bit small for my personal preference, and the latches are kind of oddly shaped. So I would say normally small latches don't really bother me, but the way that it is on the MCX, I would say that this Radian Raptor charging handle is a really nice upgrade. Moving on from there, I've got a SIG MCX Kate Moss stock. This one, they call it Kate Moss because it's skinny and it's sexy, like Kate Moss, I guess. Yeah, so this one, it's the Kate Moss stock. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very sexy and it's very solid. So I think it's one of my favorite stocks because it feels like you could just bash in a door with how solid it feels. Some of the other stocks that they offer for the MCX is really nice, but this one, just being that solid block, it just feels nice and solid. And the QD cup on the rear is non-rotational. So that's the other thing I really like about this stock, is that it doesn't just spin freely and then your sling can get all twisted up. So I really like QD cups that do not just continuously spin. So just like the SIG one right here, you can see it doesn't rotate, and I can rotate it into a different position and it will just lock in place. So it does have anti-rotational tabs on the inside of the QD cup to keep it from spinning. Moving on to the lower. The lower is almost entirely stock from SIG for the Legacy model. I have the ambidextrous safety. I have the ambidextrous mag releases. That's standard on the MCXs already. I did add a PMM enlarged paddle. The only reason why I added this was because a friend of mine gave it to me, but PMM does make really cool little innovations for guns, and having this larger paddle does make it really easy to come up and actuate on a reload. Because the paddle is so big, it's really easy for my thumb to slap it right before I get back on the gun. So this is a really cool little upgrade, especially if you're using a bolt catch that is standard. It just clamps right over it with 2 screws. And make sure you're careful when you're installing it, because I've heard of people breaking the screws and stuff on them because the screws are kind of small. But when you install it correctly, it works really well. And on night guns, especially if you're doing any night vision shooting, everything's dark. Having larger controls just makes it way easier to manipulate the gun. So highly recommend that. The grip is also a Generation 1 MCX grip. These are much more difficult to get nowadays because they've changed the grip style from the Vertus forward. So the new grips have a totally different shape. So the LVAWs that are being seen fielded, they use the early generation Legacy MCX grip. So if you're looking to build one of these, you're definitely going to want to look into that, especially because the shape of the grip is so distinct. And even in the blurry photos in the wild, you can still see them very well. And I am running a Sierra Tac sling. This isn't clone correct by any means, but this is the best sling on the market. So if you're interested in getting a 2-point sling, there is no better.
Is Sierra Tac paying you to say that?
The check is in the mail. The magazines that are used for the MCX LVAW do vary a lot. The ones that are actually issued are OK Industries magazines. And unfortunately, OK Industries has ceased to make magazines, so they may be more difficult to get a hold of in the future. This one is their Stanag Generation 1 Surefeed magazine. It does not have the dimpling that the E2 magazines have. It's just basically a GI style magazine, but it's in the black color. They actually will laser engrave 300 black, or I think it's 300 BLK on the actual LVAW issued magazines, not the silly letters that I have on here that are paint pen marked.
What does that mean?
Don't worry about it. The lettering here usually will be laser engraved in a clean silverish white color, 300 black, to indicate the caliber. I did forget to mention that the barrel in here is a 6.75 inch 300 blackout SIG barrel from the early Legacy generation. The compatibility is very interesting because as long as you have the barrel and the bolt are from the same generation, they will function properly. So the carrier you can have from any generation, but the bolt and the barrel do need to match for it to work. This one is, my LVAW MCX build, and that is basically the entire thing. I actually really like shooting this gun, but it's kind of a weird gun in the sense that the way that it's shaped with how everything has been configured, and this is the best that I can figure out how to ergonomically configure everything to be usable. There's probably some other options out there with different accessories where you can configure it in a different way. Like, for example, if you mount the light to the bottom side on the opposite end, that's sort of a CAG style. That might be interesting for you depending on your hand shape. However, because this rail is so thick, being that the outer diameter fits around a suppressor, you're gonna wanna have basically operator hands that wrap all the way around your light and your rail. So if you do have, the more dainty, smaller femboy fingers, probably not going to be able to use one of these very well. I don't have small hands, and even gripping it, it just feels like a lot of rail in my hands. But the configuration that I've put this in, it actually works really well. I do like shooting it a lot. 300 blackout is also a lot of fun to shoot, especially suppressed. I mean, this thing gets so quiet. But On the flip side, 300 blackout is very expensive to shoot. So take it as you will. Every time I'm throwing one of these down, it's like 60 cents to $1 plus per round. In some cases, for some of the heavier grain subsonic ammunition, you're looking at maybe $2, maybe $3 a round. So this shit gets pretty expensive. So just keep that in mind. The SIG patrol stock is also another option that I've seen on LVAW guns. So you don't necessarily have to get the Kate Moss because the Kate Moss has been discontinued for a while now. They have a variation that is completely straight across the rear. It doesn't have this raised section. That is the new style and it's still available, but the older Kate Moss style one, not going to be as easy to acquire. And so you can also go with the patrol stock. That one has an adjustable length of pull and it's also side folding. So that is one thing I might have forgot to mention about the LVAW that's super cool is that it gets super small. So this is a very compact weapon. You know, if you're using it inside of a vehicle or tight enclosed spaces, it's much easier to manipulate and you can fire it continuously while it's folded. You don't have to, as much as I like the LVAW folders, you can't shoot more than one round when it's folded. So you're gonna have to open it up quick. But these are nice in that it's very easy to flip it open. I actually usually keep my QD cup on the back side of the receiver here because when I have it folded, then I can still keep this slung up like this and use the gun. And then if I need to flip it open, then I'll basically have this independent of it being slung. Because if you have it mounted here, it's going to be in a super weird position when it's folded and it's not as usable when it's in the folded position like this. So that's the whole build there. I hope you like this video. If you have any questions about this particular gun or LVAWs, I will try to answer them in the comments below. Tell me what you think about clone guns, the LVAW more, and specifically, do you like it? Do you hate it? I think it's a really cool looking gun. I've also had people tell me that it looks like a piece of crap. So to each their own, but this, if anything, is one of my favorite clones. I don't really dig clones anymore, so this is one of the last ones in my collection that I'm gonna keep in clone configuration. But I will say, as a full disclosure, there are more clones that I will be overviewing in the future, so just bear with me on that. I to a certain degree, I probably won't ever not like clones, but I am getting away from that in that most of my usable builds are not clones. So cloning is cancerous. Don't do it. It's also a huge money pit. So yeah. Like for example, good luck getting an Ingall. I mean, it's possible, but I hope you're ready to, spend money bags for it. But yeah, this is my LVAW and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please check out our Instagram. If you're interested in seeing more snippets here and there, previews and stuff. I do throw up a lot of things. Follow me for more recipes on there. It's a great information source. And yeah, stay tuned for the next videos. We'll have more reviews, more podcasts and stuff coming up. Yeah, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.